Ambassador Zixa Theta floated nervously in the grand assembly chamber of the Galactic Council. His crystalline form shimmered with anxiety as he prepared to deliver news that would shake the very foundations of their understanding about the newest species to join their ranks. The humans had done something impossible. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, a sphere suspended in the vacuum of space, held together by force fields and filled with atmospheres suitable for each of the 12 ruling species. The Aquari delegates swam through their water-filled section, while the Pyronians flickered in their superheated gas chambers. Each species had conquered their own worlds through harmony with nature, learning to adapt and flow with the natural order of things. But the humans were different. Zixa Theta's translator crystal pulsed as he began his report. Esteemed leaders of the Galactic Council, I bring urgent news from Earth, the human homeworld. What we have witnessed defies all logic and natural law. The Verdanian representative, a being of pure plant matter, rustled its leaves dismissively. The humans are primitive. They've barely achieved faster-than-light travel. What could they possibly have done that concerns us? They have reversed a hurricane, Zixa Theta announced, his form flickering with distress. Not diverted it, not weathered it, but completely reversed its rotation and dissipated it. Silence fell across the chamber. Even the constantly chattering insectoid delegates ceased their buzzing. Impossible, declared Morpheus Prime, the gaseous intelligence that led the Nebula Coalition. Natural forces of that magnitude cannot be controlled. It violates the first law of planetary harmony. Zixa Theta projected a holographic recording into the center of the chamber. The image showed a massive Category 5 hurricane approaching the human settlement of Miami. The storm was a monster, winds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, a perfectly formed eye wall that promised devastation. Watch, Zixa Theta commanded. The assembled leaders observed as human aircraft began surrounding the storm, not fleeing from it, but flying directly into it. The aircraft released what appeared to be swarms of microscopic machines into the hurricane's structure. Within hours, the storm's rotation began to slow. The eye wall collapsed. The entire system, a force of nature that had been building power across thousands of kilometers of ocean, simply stopped. They call it weather nullification technology, Zixa Theta explained. Nanomachines that can alter air pressure and temperature at the molecular level. They didn't bow to nature's fury. They reached out and switched it off like extinguishing a candle. The Aquari delegates' bioluminescent patches flared in alarm. This is madness. Every civilized species learns to live in harmony with their planet's natural systems. We build our cities in safe zones. We migrate with the seasons. We adapt our bodies and our societies to fit nature's design. That is the path to enlightenment and survival. The humans, Zixa Theta continued, his voice growing steadier as he delivered more impossible news, do not follow this path. They have drained seas to create farmland. They have built cities in deserts and made them bloom with transported water. They have bored through mountains rather than go around them. And now they control the weather itself. High Chancellor Carrix of the silicon-based architects leaned forward, her crystalline form grinding with the movement. Show us more. Show us the full extent of their defiance. The hologram shifted to show the Netherlands, where massive sea walls held back an ocean that should have reclaimed the land centuries ago. It showed Dubai, a gleaming metropolis built on sand where no city should exist. It showed the massive Three Gorges Dam, where humans had chained one of their planet's mightiest rivers. They call it terraforming Earth, Zixa Theta explained. They practice on their own world for the day they will reshape others. The Fungoid Collective, speaking through their 1,000 synchronized voices, asked the question everyone was thinking. How do they justify this violation of natural order? Do they not understand the consequences? I asked their representative the same question, Zixatheta replied. She laughed. She actually laughed and said, "Nature had its chance to kill us. We survived ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues, and predators. Now it's our turn to be in charge." The chamber erupted in shocked communication. The musical tones of the harmonics clashed with the chemical signals of the pheromone lords. The electromagnetic pulses of the energy beings interfered with the quantum entanglement communication of the void walkers. It was chaos. "Order! Order!" commanded the ancient voice of the eldest, a being so old it had witnessed the birth of stars. "Zixatheta, you said they reversed a hurricane. Have they done this more than once?" "They have perfected the technology," Zixatheta confirmed. "In the past Earth year, they have stopped 16 hurricanes, redirected 3 tsunamis, and prevented approximately 47,000 deaths from what they term natural disasters. They have also begun experimenting with earthquake prevention through tectonic manipulation." "Tectonic manipulation?" The Verdanians' leaves turned pale with shock. "They dare to interfere with the movement of planetary plates?" "They pump specialized lubricants into fault lines," Zixatheta explained, showing another hologram. "They trigger small, controlled earthquakes to release pressure before it builds to dangerous levels. They call it geological maintenance." Ambassador Thurok of the warrior caste, whose people had achieved spaceflight through bioengineering themselves to survive their hostile world, stood up. His forearms crossed in a gesture of deep thought. "These humans, they do not adapt to their environment. They force their environment to adapt to them. This is either the greatest folly or the greatest strength we have ever encountered." "There's more," Zixatheta said quietly, and the chamber fell silent again. "They've begun something they call the Solar Shield Project." He projected new images showing massive satellites being constructed in Earth's orbit. Each one was the size of a small city, covered in reflective surfaces and powered by fusion reactors. "They plan to control the amount of sunlight reaching their planet," he explained. "To prevent global warming, they will simply block portions of their sun. They speak of it casually, as if dimming a star is no more complex than adjusting window blinds." The Pyrrhonians, beings of living flame who worshipped stars as deities, actually flickered and dimmed in shock. Their representative's voice crackled with disbelief. "They would dare cast shadows upon their own sun? This is blasphemy of the highest order." "To them, it's simply engineering," Zixatheta replied. "I've studied their history. They've always been like this. When their ancestors faced predators, they didn't grow claws or fangs. They made spears. When they faced cold, they didn't grow fur. They made clothing and controlled fire. When they faced rivers, they didn't learn to swim better. They built bridges." The hologram now showed human history in rapid succession. The pyramids rising from desert sands. The Great Wall stretching across mountains. Polders claimed from the sea. Cities built on swamps. Dams, tunnels, artificial islands, and finally, space stations. "Every other species in this council achieved harmony," Zixatheta continued. "The Aquari became one with their oceans. The Verdanians merged with their forests. The Pyrrhonians learned to dance with their flames. But humans? Humans looked at nature and said, no, we'll do it our way." Morpheus Prime swirled in agitation. "And their planet? Surely it rebels against such treatment. Surely nature fights back." "Their planet tried," Zixatheta admitted. "It threw everything it had at them. Diseases that should have wiped them out. They created vaccines. Predators that should have eaten them. They drove to extinction or tamed into pets. Inhospitable climates that should have been barriers. They invented air conditioning and central heating. And when nature created new challenges, they simply invented new solutions. He showed them images of human medical facilities where they repaired bodies that nature had damaged, artificial limbs that worked better than the originals, organs grown in labs to replace failed ones, genetic modifications to eliminate hereditary diseases. They even conquer death itself, piece by piece, Zixatheta said. They've extended their lifespans through pure technological will. They refuse to accept any limitation that nature places upon them. The eldest spoke again, its ancient voice carrying the weight of eons. In all my cycles, I have never encountered such a species. Every civilization we've met has found its place within the natural order. These humans, they create their own order. Tell me, Zixatheta, are they a threat to the galaxy? Zixatheta considered carefully. They are unlike any threat we've categorized before. They don't seek to destroy or conquer in the traditional sense. They seek to control, to reshape, to improve as they see it. They look at uninhabitable worlds not as obstacles, but as opportunities. They speak of transforming Mars, of building cloud cities on Venus, of creating habitats in the void itself. And their military capabilities? Asked Thurok, ever the warrior. They apply the same philosophy to warfare that they do to nature, Zixatheta replied grimly. They don't adapt to battlefield conditions. They alter them. They change the very ground upon which battles are fought. Chemical weapons that alter atmosphere composition. Weapons that create localized gravitational anomalies. They've even developed prototype devices that can temporarily alter the flow of time in small regions. The Silicon Architect's representative made a sound like grinding glass. Time manipulation? That's theoretical at best, impossible at worst. They theorized it was impossible to fly, Zixatheta countered. They theorized it was impossible to leave their planet. They theorized it was impossible to split the atom. The word impossible seems to be a challenge to them rather than a barrier. What do they want? Asked the pheromone lords, their chemical messages tinged with fear. What drives a species to such extremes? Zixatheta had asked the human representative the same question. Her answer had chilled him to his crystalline core. They want to survive, not just as individuals, not just as a species, but as a concept. They intend to outlive their star, outlive their galaxy, outlive the heat death of the universe if necessary. They refuse to go gentle into any night, no matter how natural or inevitable it might seem. The council chamber fell into contemplative silence. Each species present had achieved spaceflight by finding their perfect balance with nature. They had thought it the only way, the mature way, the enlightened way. But the humans had taken a different path. They had looked at the universe with all its rules and limitations and natural orders. And they had said, "We don't accept this." "There's one final thing," Zixatheta said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've begun something called Project Genesis." "Which is?" the eldest prompted. "They're learning to create life from scratch, not just modifying existing organisms, but building new ones from base elements. They're writing genetic code like computer programs. They speak of creating organisms designed to terraform worlds, to survive in any environment, to do whatever they need them to do." "They play at being gods," the Verdanian whispered in horror. "No," Zixatheta corrected. "They practice at it, and they're getting very, very good." The hologram showed human laboratories where scientists worked with dedication that bordered on obsession, creating, testing, refining. Each failure was just data for the next attempt. Each success was just a stepping stone to something greater. "The question before this council," Zixatheta concluded, "is not whether humanity is dangerous. They are. The question is whether they are the kind of dangerous we can work with or the kind we must work against. Because one thing is certain, they will not stop. They will not accept limitations. They will continue to grow, to change, to challenge every natural law we hold sacred." "And if we try to stop them?" Thurok asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Zixatheta's form flickered with something that might have been admiration or fear. "Then they will try to change us too. They'll see us not as enemies to be destroyed, but as problems to be solved. And given their track record with solving problems," he didn't need to finish. The council understood. Humanity didn't destroy obstacles. They transformed them. They controlled them. They made them useful. The eldest raised itself to its full height, towering over the assembly. Then we must make a choice. Do we embrace this chaos they bring, this defiance of natural order, or do we resist and risk becoming their next project? As the council began to debate, Zixatheta couldn't help but remember something else the human representative had told him. Something that perhaps explained everything. "We're not the product of our environment," she had said with that distinctly human smile that could mean anything from friendship to threat. "Our environment is the product of us. That's what makes us human. We don't just adapt to the universe, we adapt the universe to us, and we're just getting started." Looking around the chamber at species who had spent millions of years learning to live within nature's rules, Zixatheta wondered if they were prepared for a species that had spent its entire existence learning to break them. The debate raged on, but one thing was becoming clear. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans were here, and they brought with them something more terrifying than any weapon, more powerful than any technology. They brought the absolute conviction that nothing, not even the fundamental laws of nature itself, was beyond their ability to control. 6 months after the initial council meeting, the situation had escalated beyond anyone's wildest projections. Admiral Koresh of the Galactic Patrol stood before an emergency session, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with barely contained agitation. "The humans have done it again," he announced without preamble. "This time, they've exceeded even our worst fears." The council chamber, still recovering from the paradigm shift of the last meeting, buzzed with nervous energy. The 12 species had spent months debating humanity's place in the galaxy. But while they debated, the humans had acted. "Explain," commanded the eldest, its ancient form showing signs of stress for the first time in millennia. Koresh activated a holographic display showing a barren world in the Kepler 442 system. "This is Desolation, a planet we've monitored for centuries. Toxic atmosphere, no magnetic field. Surface temperature ranging from 200 to 400 degrees Celsius depending on exposure to its sun. We classified it as permanently uninhabitable." The image shifted, and gasps echoed through the chamber. Where once stood a dead world, now hung a planet with swirling white clouds. Patches of blue and green were visible through the atmospheric cover. Ships, unmistakably human in design, swarmed around it like bees around a hive. "They terraformed it," Koresh stated flatly. "In 6 months, a process our best scientists said would take 50,000 years minimum, they accomplished in half a solar rotation." The Verdanian ambassador's leaves rustled violently. "Impossible! Terraforming requires careful cultivation, generations of atmospheric adjustment, delicate ecological balance." "The humans," Koresh interrupted, "deployed what they call Genesis bombs, 37,000 automated units that burrowed into the planet's crust and detonated simultaneously. The explosions didn't destroy. They transformed, released engineered bacteria that eat rock and excrete oxygen, triggered volcanic activity to restore the magnetic field, melted polar deposits we didn't even know existed to create oceans." He paused, letting the magnitude sink in. "They transformed an entire world like they were renovating a house, and they're already selling real estate." The Aquari delegate emerged partially from her water-filled section. "Selling? They're commercializing planets?" 20 billion humans are on waiting lists for what they call frontier properties," Koresh confirmed. "They've incorporated planet-flipping companies. There are human corporations whose entire business model is finding dead worlds, transforming them, and selling them to colonists." Morpheus Prime swirled in patterns of deep thought. "And the ecological implications? Surely such rapid transformation creates unstable—" "Stable," Koresh cut him off again. "Perfectly stable. They've developed something called ecosystem templates. pre-designed modular biospheres that can be installed like software, Desert World Package, Ocean Paradise Suite, Alpine Adventure Mode, they have catalogs. He projected images of human marketing materials, glossy advertisements showing families picnicking on worlds that had been lifeless rock mere months before, children playing in forests that had been designed in laboratories and grown at accelerated rates, oceans teeming with fish that had been genetically optimized for their new environments. "They're mass-producing habitable worlds," the Silicon architect whispered in horrified awe. "It gets worse," Koresh continued. "Or better, depending on your perspective. They've started something called the Dead Star Initiative." The Peronians, who revered stars above all else, flared with alarm. "They dare interfere with stellar bodies?" "Interfere?" Koresh laughed bitterly. "They're reigniting them. Brown dwarfs, stellar remnants that should have remained cold and dead for eternity. The humans are literally bringing dead stars back to life to create new solar systems." The hologram showed human ships surrounding a brown dwarf, massive constructs that dwarfed anything the Galactic Council had ever built. Streams of energy poured from the ships into the dead star. Slowly, impossibly, the stellar corpse began to glow. Nuclear fusion restarted. Light and heat poured forth where there had been only darkness for billions of years. "They call it stellar resurrection," Koresh explained. "They've successfully reignited 3 brown dwarfs so far. Each one now supports a manufactured solar system with precisely positioned planets in habitable zones. They're not just controlling nature anymore, they're creating it wholesale." Ambassador Thurok stood, his warrior's instincts screaming warnings. "This goes beyond adaptation or control. They're rewriting the fundamental structure of the galaxy. What right do they have?" "I asked their lead engineer that very question," Koresh replied. "She looked at me like I was speaking nonsense and said, 'The same right that gravity has to pull things down. We exist, therefore we shape. That's what intelligence does.'" The fungoid collective's 1,000 voices spoke in unison. "Have they considered the philosophical implications? The moral weight of creating entire biospheres?" Koresh projected another image. A human child, no more than 10 years old, working at a computer terminal. "This is Lily Chen. She designed the ecosystem for New Paradise, their 47th terraformed world. When I asked her about the moral implications of playing God, she corrected me. She said she wasn't playing. She was practicing for when humanity would need to rebuild the universe after entropy claims it." Stunned silence met this pronouncement. The idea that a species was already planning for the heat death of the universe, already developing contingencies for existence beyond the end of everything, was too vast to easily comprehend. "There's more," Koresh said, his voice growing strained. "They've begun experimenting with dimensional folding." "That's purely theoretical," protested the Void Walker delegate. "Was theoretical," Koresh corrected. "They've successfully created pocket universes, small ones, barely large enough to contain a city. But they're working on scaling up. They talk about creating backup realities, spare universes they can move into if this one becomes uninhabitable." The hologram showed human facilities that seemed to bend space around them, where the laws of physics became suggestions rather than rules. Scientists worked with reality itself, like sculptors with clay, shaping dimensions and folding space-time into configurations that shouldn't exist. "And their latest project?" Koresh's mandibles clicked nervously. "They call it the Consciousness Preservation Initiative. They're working on technology to upload human minds into artificial substrates, not just to extend life, but to make it independent of biological form entirely. They plan to survive the death of their bodies, the death of their worlds, even the death of physical reality itself." The eldest's form rippled with disturbance. "They seek true immortality, not just of individual lives, but of their entire species concept." The project lead explained it to me, Koresh said. He said death was just another natural limitation, and humans don't accept limitations. He spoke of a future where human consciousness could exist as pure information, creating and destroying realities at will, becoming functionally indistinguishable from gods. And they see nothing wrong with this? The Verdanian asked weakly. Wrong? Koresh laughed, a harsh sound. They see it as their destiny. They call it the Great Ascension, the final victory over nature. The moment when humanity stops being subject to any rules but the ones they make themselves. The pheromone lords released chemicals signaling deep distress. We've encountered aggressive species before, conquerors, destroyers, assimilators. But this... They don't want to conquer us, Koresh agreed. They want to obsolete the very concept of natural limitation that defines us. Every species in this council found harmony with nature. The humans intend to replace nature entirely, with something they design, something they control, something that serves them. He paused, gathering himself for the worst news. 3 days ago, they announced the Milky Way Optimization Project. Even the eldest flinched at this. They wouldn't dare. They plan to restructure our entire galaxy, Koresh confirmed. Reposition stars for optimal energy harvesting. Create artificial wormhole networks for instant travel. Install what they call cosmic climate control to prevent supernovas and gamma-ray bursts. They want to turn the Milky Way into what they term a managed galactic garden. And if we refuse? Thurok asked, though he dreaded the answer. They seemed genuinely puzzled when I asked that, Koresh admitted. The project coordinator said, "Why would you refuse improvements? We're offering to upgrade your entire existence, free of charge even." The council absorbed this in horrified silence. The humans didn't see themselves as conquerors or tyrants. They saw themselves as renovators, arriving to fix up a neglected neighborhood. The fact that other species lived in that neighborhood and might like it the way it was simply didn't factor into their worldview. I've studied their history in detail, Koresh continued. This is what they've always done. When early humans found themselves in hostile environments, they didn't just survive. They thrived. They turned deserts into gardens, tundra into farmland, even the depths of the ocean into habitable space. Now they're simply operating on a larger scale. But surely they must see the danger, Morpheus Prime pleaded. Such power without wisdom, without restraint. Oh, they see danger, Koresh said. They just see it differently than we do. Where we see the danger of acting, they see the danger of not acting. They point to extinct species on their world and say, they adapted to nature and died when nature changed. They point to themselves and say, we changed nature and survived. To them, we're the ones taking the dangerous path. The hologram shifted to show human philosophers and ethicists in debate. But even their ethicists didn't question whether humanity should reshape reality. They only debated how best to do it. The most terrifying part, Koresh added quietly, is their children. I visited a human school. 6-year-olds were designing ecosystems for fun. 10-year-olds were running universe simulations. Teenagers were casually discussing which laws of physics they'd modify if given the chance. This isn't just their technology, it's their fundamental worldview. They're raising generation after generation to see reality itself as malleable. A young human appeared on the hologram, perhaps 15 years old, speaking at what appeared to be a science fair. Natural selection is obsolete, the youth said confidently. We are no longer products of evolution. Evolution is now our product. We will direct it, control it, and eventually transcend it entirely. The universe evolved consciousness so that consciousness could evolve the universe. We are that consciousness. They believe they're the universe's way of upgrading itself, the Aquari delegate murmured in shock. Worse, Koresh corrected. They believe they're the universe's only hope of survival. They talk about the big freeze, the big rip, all the ways cosmologists predict the universe will end. And they're already working on solutions. A species that has existed for barely a cosmic eye blink is making plans to save reality itself from entropy. And if they're wrong, the Silicon architect asked, if their hubris leads to catastrophe? Koresh displayed one final image. A human woman, elderly by their standards, connected to machines that monitored her life signs. She was dying, clearly, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. "This is Dr. Sarah Constantine," he explained, "lead researcher on the Universal Persistence Project. She's dying of an incurable disease. When I asked her what would happen if humanity's plans failed, if their attempts to control everything led to disaster, she smiled. Do you know what she said?" The council waited in tense silence. She said, "Then we'll control disaster too. We'll harness catastrophe, domesticate apocalypse, and turn the end of everything into the beginning of something else. That's what humans do. We don't accept endings, we just rewrite them." The hologram faded, leaving the council in darkness lit only by their own bioluminescence, flames, and energy fields. Each species represented had spent millions of years evolving in harmony with their environments, finding their place in the natural order of things. And now they faced a species that looked at the natural order the way a painter looked at a blank canvas, not as something to respect and preserve, but as something to fill with their own vision. "The question," Koresh concluded, "is no longer whether we can stop them. I don't believe we can. They've grown too powerful too quickly. The question is whether we try to guide them, join them, or simply get out of their way and hope they remember we exist when they're done remaking everything." "There is another option," Thurok said slowly. "We could try to understand them, to learn from them. Perhaps there's wisdom in their madness." "Wisdom?" the Verdanian scoffed. "In destroying the natural order?" "In transcending it," Thurok corrected. "Every species here achieved spaceflight by finding balance with nature. But perhaps that very balance is what limits us. Perhaps the humans are showing us a path we were too wise to see." The debate that followed was fierce, but something had shifted. The shock was giving way to a terrible fascination. If the humans could terraform worlds in months, reignite stars, create pocket universes, what else could they do? And more importantly, what could other species do if they learned to think like humans? It was a seductive thought, and perhaps that was the most dangerous thing about humanity, not their power to change the universe, but their ability to make others want to change it too. As the council argued, human ships continued their work throughout the galaxy, transforming, building, improving by their standards, creating a future where the very concept of natural law was obsolete, replaced by whatever humanity decided reality should be. The universe had existed for billions of years under the rule of physics, chemistry, and chance. Now it faced the rule of will, imagination, and human ambition. And humanity was just getting started. The emergency that finally forced the Galactic Council to fully comprehend humanity's true nature came from the edge of known space, a phenomenon that had terrified civilizations for millions of years was approaching. A wandering black hole, stellar mass, on a direct collision course with the Sanctuary system, where 12 inhabited worlds housed over 40 billion souls. High Chancellor Carrix called the emergency session with unprecedented urgency. "The Devourer approaches," she announced, using the ancient name for wandering black holes. "Calculations confirm it will pass through the Sanctuary system in 18 months. The gravitational disruptions alone will tear the planets apart." The council chamber fell into despair. Throughout galactic history, wandering black holes had been death sentences for entire civilizations. The only response was evacuation, and even that rarely saved more than a fraction of the population. "We must begin immediate evacuation protocols," the Aquari delegate stated, though her bioluminescent patches dimmed with the knowledge of how many would die. "We can perhaps save 20% if we commandeer every available vessel." "The humans have offered to handle it," Carix interrupted. Shocked silence greeted this statement. "Handle it?" Morpheus Prime swirled in agitation. "It's a black hole, a wound in space-time itself. You cannot handle a fundamental force of cosmic destruction." Carix projected a communication from Earth's newly formed Department of Cosmic Engineering. A human woman in her 30s appeared, identified as Director Zhang Wei. She looked slightly annoyed, as if the galaxy's greatest minds were panicking over a minor inconvenience. "Greetings, Galactic Council," Director Zhang said briskly. "We've reviewed your black hole problem. Fairly straightforward. We can either redirect it, dissipate it, or, if you're feeling creative, repurpose it as an energy source. What's your preference?" The Pyronians flared in disbelief. "You speak of controlling a black hole as if discussing weather modification," Director Zhang shrugged. "Similar principles, larger scale. We've been experimenting with micro-black holes for power generation for 2 years now. This is just a matter of scaling up our containment technology." "Containment technology?" The eldest's voice cracked for the first time in recorded history. "For a stellar mass black hole?" "Option 1, Zhang continued, seemingly oblivious to the Council's shock. "We use a focused gravitational beam to redirect its path. Think of it as a cosmic billiard shot. Option 2, we inject it with exotic matter to cause evaporation. Messy, but effective. Option 3, we encase it in a dimensional fold and use it as the galaxy's largest power plant. Personally, I recommend option 3. Waste not, want not." Thurok found his voice first. "You've done this before?" "On smaller scales," Zhang admitted. "But the physics are consistent. We redirected a rogue planet last month as a training exercise. A black hole is trickier, but hardly impossible. Give us 6 weeks." "6 weeks?" the Silicon architect ground out. "We calculated it would take the entire galactic fleet just to evacuate a fraction of the population in 18 months, and you claim you can stop a black hole in 6 weeks?" Zhang checked something off-screen. 6 weeks includes safety margins and paperwork. The actual intervention should take about 4 days. We're bureaucratic, not slow." The Council exchanged glances of disbelief, fear, and something else. Hope? Could the humans truly do what they claimed? "What do you require from us?" Carix asked carefully. "Just stay out of the intervention zone," Zhang replied. "Oh, and decide what you want done with the black hole afterward. The sanctuary system could use a new power source. A properly contained black hole could provide clean energy for the next 1 trillion years." The transmission ended, leaving the Council in stunned silence. "They're insane," the Verdanian whispered. "Or we're too sane," Thurok countered. "Perhaps sanity itself is a limitation." 4 weeks later, the entire Galactic Council assembled in person at a safe observation point to witness humanity's attempt. Safe being relative, they were still several light years from the intervention zone, watching through the most powerful sensors available. The human fleet that arrived defied conventional understanding. Ships the size of moons, constructed of materials that shouldn't exist, powered by energies that violated several supposedly inviolable laws of physics. They arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the approaching black hole's path. "Beginning Phase 1, came the calm announcement from the human command ship. "Deploying dimensional anchors." Beams of something that wasn't quite light, wasn't quite matter, and wasn't quite energy lanced out from the human ships. They penetrated space itself, creating a lattice of frozen reality around the black hole. The monster of gravity and collapsed matter suddenly found itself caged by the very fabric of existence. "Dimensional anchors stable," the human operator reported with the same tone someone might use to announce successful parallel parking. Beginning Phase 2, Exotic Matter Injection. Streams of particles that existed more as mathematical equations than physical reality poured into the black hole. The event horizon, that ultimate boundary from which nothing could escape, began to ripple, to fluctuate, to shrink. "This is impossible," breathed the Voidwalker delegate. "They're making a black hole smaller. Phase 2 complete. Black hole mass reduced by 40%. Beginning Phase 3, dimensional folding." Reality bent. Not the gentle warping that massive objects usually caused, but a sharp, deliberate origami folding of space-time itself. The black hole, still struggling against its dimensional cage, was suddenly elsewhere. Not moved. That would imply travel through space. Simply relocated, as if the universe's filing system had been reorganized. Phase 3 complete. Black hole successfully relocated to containment facility. Beginning Phase 4, installation of harvest equipment. The Council watched in awe as massive structures materialized around the black hole. Not built, materialized. The humans were pulling matter from quantum foam itself, creating from nothing through sheer technological will. Installation complete. The sanctuary system now has access to approximately 12 billion years of clean energy. You're welcome. The entire operation had taken 57 hours. As the Council tried to process what they'd witnessed, Director Zhang appeared on their screens again. Successful test run. By the way, we've identified 17 more wandering black holes that pose future threats to inhabited systems. We'll handle them proactively. No charge. Consider it neighborhood beautification. "How?" the eldest asked, its ancient voice reduced to a whisper. "How do you do the impossible so casually?" Zhang smiled. "That's your problem right there. You still think in terms of possible and impossible. We think in terms of current capabilities and future capabilities. Today's impossible is tomorrow's homework assignment for our elementary school students." She pulled up a holographic display. "In fact, let me show you what those students are working on. This is from New Tokyo Elementary School's 6th grade science fair." The display showed children, human children no more than 12 years old, presenting projects that made the Council's greatest scientists look like primitives. One child had created a miniature universe in a bottle, complete with accelerated time allowing the evolution of tiny civilizations. Another had developed a virus that infected reality itself, making localized areas follow different physical laws. A third had built what she called a probability engine that could retroactively change past events by manipulating quantum uncertainties. "These are children," the Fungoid Collective's 1,000 voices whispered in unison. "Children playing with the fundamental forces of existence." "Playing is how they learn," Zhang explained. "By the time they're adults, reshaping reality is as natural to them as breathing. We don't teach our children to respect the universe's limitations. We teach them to debug the universe's code." High Chancellor Carrick's found her voice. "Director Zhang, I must ask, what is humanity's ultimate goal? Where does this end?" Zhang's expression grew serious for the first time. "End? Chancellor? We're just getting started. You see the universe as it is. We see the universe as a rough draft. Our goal? To revise it until it's perfect, and then to revise our definition of perfect and start again." "But surely," Morpheus Prime interjected, "there must be forces even you cannot control. Entropy itself, the heat death of the universe, the fundamental laws of thermodynamics." "Working on it," Zhang said casually. "Dr. Peterson thinks he's found a loophole in the second law of thermodynamics, something about treating entropy as a coding error rather than a physical law. We should have a prototype anti-entropy device within 50 years. The Council sat in stunned silence. The humans weren't just controlling nature on a planetary or stellar scale. They were preparing to rewrite the operating system of reality itself. "I have one last question," Thurok said slowly. "What happens to species like us? Those who found harmony with nature rather than dominance over it? Do we have a place in your revised universe?" Zhang's expression softened slightly. "Of course you do. Diversity is useful. You've found different solutions to existence than we have. That's valuable data. Besides, we're not tyrants. We're engineers. We want to improve things for everyone. Your harmony with nature? We'll make nature more harmonious. Your adaptation to environments? We'll make environments worth adapting to." She paused, then added, "Look, I understand this is a lot to process. 1,000 years ago, we were hitting rocks together to make fire. Now we're juggling black holes. The pace of change is accelerating, and it's only going to get faster. You can resist it, you can join it, or you can guide it, but you can't stop it. Because the one thing humans are really good at is refusing to accept can't." The transmission ended, leaving the council alone with their thoughts and the distant view of a black hole that now powered an entire solar system instead of destroying it. The eldest spoke into the silence. "I have lived since the first stars formed. I have seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations bloom and wither. I thought I had seen everything the universe could produce. I was wrong." It turned to address the full council. "The humans have shown us something unprecedented. Not just power over nature, but the complete rejection of powerlessness itself. They look at the universe not as a home to adapt to, but as raw material to shape. And they're succeeding." "So what do we do?" the Aquari delegate asked plaintively. "We evolve," Thurok said firmly. "Not biologically, but philosophically. The humans have proven that accepting limitations is a choice, not a requirement. Perhaps it's time we made different choices." Over the following months, something unprecedented happened in galactic civilization. Inspired by humanity's example, other species began to question their own assumptions about what was possible. The Verdanians, who had spent millions of years growing in harmony with nature, began to ask why they couldn't improve nature. The Aquari, who had adapted perfectly to their oceans, started wondering what lay beyond mere adaptation. Research collaborations formed. The Silicon architects worked with human physicists to develop new materials that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The Pyronians shared their understanding of stellar mechanics, which humans promptly used to develop stars that burned backwards, consuming entropy and producing order. But perhaps the most significant change came when humanity announced its most ambitious project yet, the Universal Operating System Update. Director Zhang, now representing humanity on the Galactic Council, presented the plan. "We've identified what we call legacy code in the universe's fundamental structure, inefficiencies that have been there since the Big Bang. We propose a collaborative effort to debug reality itself, make physics more user-friendly, eliminate unnecessary restrictions, patch the exploits that lead to suffering and death." "You want to reprogram existence?" Carix asked, though by now the question was more curious than shocked. "Reprogram, optimize, and add new features," Zhang confirmed. "Imagine a universe where the speed of light isn't a limit, just a default setting, where entropy is optional, where consciousness can exist independently of matter, where death is just another curable condition." "And if something goes wrong?" the Verdanian asked. "If your updates crash reality itself?" Zhang grinned. "Then we'll restore from backup. We've been creating pocket universe backups for the last 6 months. Current reality is version 1.0. We're proposing version 2.0. If it doesn't work out, we roll back and try version 2.1. The vote was closer than anyone would have predicted a year earlier. But in the end, curiosity and ambition won over caution and tradition. The Galactic Council voted to support humanity's Universal Operating System update. As preparations began, the eldest approached Zhang privately. "I must know," it said. "Is there anything humanity fears? Anything you accept you cannot change?" Zhang thought for a long moment. "We used to fear death, so we're curing it. We used to fear the dark, so we made stars. We used to fear being alone, so we're creating new forms of consciousness. I suppose what we really fear is running out of things to change. But given the infinite nature of existence, that seems unlikely." "And what of meaning?" the eldest pressed. "If you can control everything, change everything, what gives existence purpose?" "The changing itself," Zhang replied without hesitation. "The act of taking what is and making it what could be. Every problem solved reveals new problems to tackle. Every limitation overcome shows us new limitations to challenge. The universe is our canvas. Reality is our clay. And we're going to keep sculpting until we run out of imagination. And then we'll upgrade our imagination and keep going." As the eldest departed, it realized that humanity had answered the ultimate question differently than any species before them. Where others asked, "What is our place in the universe?" humans asked, "What should the universe's place be in our plans?" And they were reshaping existence itself to find out. The transformation of the galaxy accelerated. Dead worlds bloomed with engineered life. Dying stars were rekindled or converted to more useful forms. The very vacuum of space was seeded with nanomachines that converted quantum fluctuations into useful resources. Black holes became power stations. Neutron stars became computational nodes in a galaxy-spanning network that made thought itself faster than light. And through it all, humanity's children played with forces that had once been considered divine prerogatives. They created life, destroyed entropy, built universes, and treated the fundamental constants of reality as suggestions rather than rules. The Galactic Council watched in awe and terror and growing excitement as humanity turned their galaxy from a collection of stars following natural law into a vast, organized, optimized system designed for life, growth, and endless possibility. But perhaps the most telling moment came when a young human child, no more than 8 years old, approached the eldest during a diplomatic visit to Earth. She tugged on what passed for its appendage and asked innocently, "Why did you all accept living in a broken universe for so long? Didn't you know you could fix it?" The eldest had no answer. Because from the human perspective, that's all they had done, fixed what was broken. The fact that the rest of the galaxy hadn't seen it as broken was merely a difference of perspective, and perspective, as humanity had proven, was just another thing that could be changed. As the Universal Operating System update began its implementation, reality itself held its breath. The old universe, governed by immutable laws and natural limitations, was ending. The new universe, governed by will and imagination and human ambition, was beginning. And in the command center overseeing it all, Director Zhang smiled and spoke the words that would echo through the transformed cosmos. "Let there be light, version 2.0. The universe obeyed. It had learned, like everything else, that resistance was not futile. It was simply inefficient. And efficiency was something humanity would fix, one fundamental force at a time. Nature had ruled for 13 billion years. Now it was humanity's turn. And they were just getting started.